Hey there, out in Facebook land, or possibly the entire universe. I was doing a Facebook Live with some friends the other night, and we got a comment. Somebody said, like people all over the universe are watching you. And I sort of got this, I was like, whoa. So wherever you are on the space-time continuum, welcome to my Facebook Live. Hi, it's Brenna. As always, wave your hands wildly if you can't hear me. And often I have a little bit more time to kind of ramble on my side and answer questions on your side, and about 30 minutes today. So if there's anything I'm saying that you want to make a share about or you have a question about, really invite you to bring it early so that I can weave it in. And I have a feeling I'm going to do a follow-up to this live anyway, because intuition is it's a word that gets thrown around a lot. And I believe that it's quite deep and quite nuanced. So let this be the starting point. There's one other thing I want to say. So I'm going to make a shameless plug, which is if at any point you hear something and you think it's valuable, I invite you to share this Facebook Live as well so that other people can hear. And that would be a huge support to me as well. So one of the places where I believe that intuition is misunderstood, although I think that most people would agree at a really cognitive level about this, the way that I see intuition actually practiced, or like manifested in the world, there's this, one of the things that I think is misunderstood is that often when people say, oh, I'm just following my truth, or that's just my truth, or I'm following my intuition, that often what they mean is I'm making up a story about something and I'm being right about it. And my belief about intuition is that it's usually more of a feeling. Sometimes there's a knowing. So I guess this is what I want to say, is that the way that I believe that intuition is sort of misunderstood and then misfollowed is maybe it's less actually about the making up the story about the thing, but it's the pretending to know more than you actually do, or the need to know more than you actually do. And counterintuitively, or like what that often creates actually, is the negating of what you truly know. So it's like this weird hook. And most people are very aware of the place, like, oh, I discounted myself, I didn't listen to my truth, I could tell that. So we're aware of how we discount ourselves, but the mechanism, and maybe I'll just keep this live to this particular piece, we'll see. The mechanism that I see actually goes into discounting ourselves often actually comes from trying to pretend like we know more than we do. So I think about a couple of examples of that in my life. And I'll look at it from both sides, but on one side is probably almost like 15 years ago now. I was in a relationship with a man that, it was just painful at that point. Like, it was just painful. He was often really mean to me, and it was not good. And I can look back and I can tell the whole story about it and things like that. But I remember sitting on my bed one night, and so again, this is where it's not always just like a feeling, but it was small pieces. I was sitting in my bed and I was like probably very sad about something. Like, I was just very sad about the whole thing a lot in those days. And it was almost like a bubble rose in front of my face. And when it got right in front of my face, it popped. And inside that bubble was, you need to move out. And even at that time, I think I remember, but for whatever reason, and kind of like the blessing that came to me in that moment was that for the most part, I didn't jump to like, well, why that was or why that shouldn't be, or anything else that meant. I actually allowed myself to just have this like truth or intuition bubble just as it was. I need to move out. It was basically like, I need to live in a different place than this man lives. And I didn't worry about breaking up with him or what that meant for our relationship. It was just like, oh, that is all I know. And the minute that I would try to step out of into knowing something more, or knowing what that meant, or knowing what that meant about him, or why that was, things would sort of get chaotic or crumble. As long as I stayed right in, all I know is that I need to move. Then there was a certain kind of, I mean, it was still a very hard time, but it all just happened. And then, I mean, the thing that happened in that situation was, as soon as I moved out of his house, I was like, I need to not be in this relationship. Like, what the fuck am I doing here? But I actually couldn't really know that until I followed the very immediate thing that I knew, which was, I need to move out. And as long as I stayed just in that, then the path unfolded before me. And so often, it comes up around trust a lot. It's like, well, I don't trust them because ... or I don't want to go there because ... And we put it out of ourselves, or we sort of make up like, I need to know more beyond what I actually do. When often it's just like, I don't want to be here, or I don't want to go to that party, or I want to go there. Oh, this is like on the positive side of this, or like the yes side versus the no side. Probably about 4 years. Well, it would have been 4 years ago in December-ish. I got in touch. I reconnected with someone that I had known a long time ago. And it's funny, this person has now become a mentor of mine, but he wasn't at the time. So I was like, do I say I got in touch with my mentor? Anyway, I reconnected with someone who had been in my life about 10 years ago. And so this is Rich. This is Rich Litvin, who's a mentor of mine now. And we reconnected. And through that connection, he shared the audio recordings of these 3-day intensives that he leads, that are around leadership and coaching and developing the business of coaching. And it took me a long time, because it's literally the entire audio of 3 days of these intensives. And I had 2 small children and, all these things. So it kind of took me a while. But as I was listening, I had this, again, sometimes my intuition really speaks to me in like a sensory, but I actually get words a lot, but they're very, very simple. They're not big stories. So 2 things happened listening to this audio. One is, there was another man on there who also became a teacher of mine named Teo Alfaro. And he, on the audio, so I couldn't see it, I don't know who the other person was. There were whole pieces that were kind of mysterious. I'd never met Teo before. Had no idea what he looked like, but he led a process that had to do with walking through like moments of time in your life. And so he led this process, and I wasn't really doing the process as I was listening, but then there was question and answer, and somebody asked a question. And I don't even remember what the question was. And Teo's response to them, and remember, this is on audio of people I've never met. He says to this woman, he says, oh, you need to remember the moment you were born. I'm driving in the car, and I burst into tears. And I was crying. I was sobbing. I was sobbing so hard I had to pull the car over. And my logical mind said, what the fuck is that? But that deeper part of me was like, this is something. Hi, Karen. And I didn't even need to know what it was. I just knew it was something. And it was something that needed to be followed. even though I didn't know how, I didn't know why, I didn't know what. So that was on these audios. The other thing that was a recurring voice, so that was more of like a sensory emotional experience that was just like, okay, notice, take note of that. The other thing was that I kept hearing the words literally in my head, I need to be in that room with those people. And I didn't really know, like, I mean, I know, but it didn't make sense exactly. But I would hear, I need to be in that room with those people. It wasn't, you need to hire Rich as your coach, like whatever the other stories were around it. I need to be in that room with those people. And on the basis of that, I bought a ticket to go to one of Rich's intensives. And at that time, about 4 years ago, I mean, that was a real stretch. It's like $1,500 and a flight to LA, and I need to find somewhere to stay. And my daughter was 1. I mean, like what it took at that time in my life for me to go to that intensive was fairly astronomical. But there was a voice that said, you need to be in that room with those people. And I followed it. And I could tell you all the stories about all the ways that you know, how that actually happened. But frankly, that one decision has changed my life. It would take me the better part of, you know, a day to actually tell you all the ways that's changed my life. Literally the way in which my work in the world has changed because of it. The way that my intimate relationship has been changed because of that decision, the friends that I have made, the collaborations that I have made, like I mean, where I'm at financially, literally at that time, I put it on my credit card and I was in debt. And this year it was like I looked behind me and I was like, check it out. Like I made over $100,000 last year. Again, there's lots of steps in between, but all of that actually came from the relationship I have with my partner right now. I do not believe I would have that relationship if I hadn't made this decision to go to this intensive. And it was less about exactly what happened during those 3 days and everything that came after, but it came because I listened to this voice in my head that said, you need to be in that room with those people. And I didn't like second guess it or question it or, you know, do a bunch of stuff around it. I was like, I trust that. So if I'm going to follow what I said, like what it is and what it isn't, to me, what it is, again, it can look so many different ways, but it often comes in a very like direct way. You know, I burst into tears hearing Teo say on a recording, you need to remember the moment you were born, not even to me, right? To some other random person that I probably still haven't met. I listened to that. And I went up to him like a fangirl at that intensive, and I was like, you don't know me, but, and that also, you know, like all of these changed my life. He literally became a teacher of mine and connected to me to parts of myself that I don't think I would have found otherwise. It's very direct, you know, that thought, that bubble that came up and said, you need to move out of this house. I need to be in that room with those people, right? That's what it is. It's a direct feeling. It's a direct voice. The words that come with intuition are usually very simple. They're the kind of words that my children could understand. I like that. I don't like that. Go to that place. Listen to that person. So, you know, like, or they're an emotional response. They're a physical sensation that cannot be denied. What it isn't is all the stories about those words or feelings or sensations or emotions. And I just read this quote. I wonder if I can find it now. I just read this quote. Oh, here we go. Ooh. Oh, right. So it's Glennon Mountain Doyle, who was the founder of Momastery and Together Rising. And many of you, I'm sure, know of her, whether you know her in this capacity or not. She's an extraordinary woman. This is a little tangent. I'm going to come back to this though. But so I was reading Glennon's blog when she was a quote unquote mommy blogger, but I was reading them when my son was very young. And I just, like, again, I would call this my intuition, was that it was fairly early on. I was, I think many new mothers are kind of overwhelmed and scared and just want to do everything for their children. And then there's a shit ton of information. Everybody has the right way to do it, the wrong way to do it. You're going to fuck your kids up no matter what, like all these things. And all the books and all the, parenting chat sites or all these things. And again, it was like a gut feeling inside me that was like, wipe that all away. And there were about 4 blogs written by actual mothers that I would read every single day. And one of them was Glennon's Momastery, and one of them was, this is horrible, I'm blanking, Janelle and Renegade Mothering. One of them was, at the time it was called Puri Floors. I don't know the woman's name. She's taken her blog down. I think she was fairly private, but it impacted me deeply. And then one was this Christian homeschooling mom of like 5 kids. And in some way her life was so different than mine, but I could feel this like thread that ran through it. So I was like, this is where I come, not exactly for advice, but I think often when we want advice, what we want is to feel safer about our parenting in the world. So again, intuition, I don't know how I got on that, except that I was following Glennon for, now it's been like 9 years. And she just posted on Instagram, she said, one of the most revolutionary acts is for a woman to not explain herself. And I read that and I thought, yes. And because I knew I was going to do this about intuition, I believe that so often our need to explain why to ourselves, that's our, like, we try to explain ourselves to ourselves first, and then it comes out as explaining ourselves to other people. But that place where we're coming up with this story, like, what does this mean? Oh, it's because he's an asshole, or like all the things we make up about the external world to validate our intuition are actually us detracting from they're that need to explain ourselves to ourselves instead of just going like, I feel this. And it is so vulnerable, even just internally, let alone externally, but even just really, and then it's easy to blame it on like, everybody asks me to explain myself, or they don't trust me. Like, who cares? Fuck that. You're not trusting yourself first. And that is the most revolutionary act. I have an intuition and I don't even need to explain it to myself. That will change your life. So what it isn't are all the stories that you tell. And I really encourage you to look first and foremost where you're telling them to yourselves. And then you go out and you try to get other people on the bandwagon because you're afraid that you're crazy or that they're going to judge you for following your intuition. But first, actually, you're afraid that you're crazy for following your intuition. So focus there. And the rest of it, honestly, the external world, just like, it just doesn't matter as much as we think it does. It's not that it doesn't have impact. It absolutely does, but it really doesn't matter as much as we think it does. So that really bridges into how to cultivate yours. And the primary invitation, the primary practice I would give is, I'm going to give 2 because I'm greedy like that. But the first is to listen. So maybe, oh, Brenna, that comment just made me really happy. The first is, it's listen and notice. So maybe you use, your phone and you have the audio or the note-taking function. Maybe you get a little notebook it's small and it fits in your purse or your back pocket, and it's only your intuition notebook. That's it. Maybe Maybe it's a daily reflection practice you have, but it's some way of asking yourself the question, like, what is my intuition showing me today? And then, divorced completely from whether you follow your intuition or not, is being honest about what it's showing you. Like, oh, I saw this person's number pop up and my stomach tightened. Just write it down. Just give yourself an audio note. Like, just start to actually be honest about how your intuition is showing up for you. And then, and in every one of those moments, right? Like, if someone's number is going to pop up on your phone, your stomach's going to tighten, and you're going to be like, that's my intuition, because I know that they are ... So stop yourself right there. And let's just say your intuition is just, I saw somebody's name pop up on my phone and my stomach tightened. That's all we know. I felt afraid. My body got tight. I didn't want to pick up the phone. If we just leave it at that, that's what I would say. That's your intuition speaking to you. I am not saying that any of those things are not true about that person, but it is actually a power leak to spend any energy and attention on that part. The truth, and what you know to be true, is I didn't want to answer the phone. My body tightened. I felt afraid. I'm making these up, but this, your own version of this. An ad popped up, and a voice in my head said, you should go to that. I just did this recently. I hired a coach. I actually still don't know how much I need to pay him because he hasn't told me, but I just said yes, with hardly ever meeting him, because I saw him, and like literally something in like the front line of my body said, I want to work with that man. I didn't know what he did. I did these sessions while I was in LA this past weekend. They were some of the most painful experiences I've ever had in my life, and I would recommend it to anyone. So you can find him here on Facebook as White Horse McCoy. But I did not know what I was getting into, and I didn't really know why, but like there was something that said that. That's all I knew. And then the second practice I would give of cultivation is to follow it in the smallest way possible. And the reason I say that is that most of us are afraid of our intuition because we think we're going to have to do huge things, like leave our jobs and break up with our boyfriends and, sell our house, move from where we live. Like, we think we're going to have to completely upend our life. And that's not true. It's not true that that you won't do those things. But when you make the commitment to yourself, I will hear, right? Often we think listen, when we say like listen to your intuition, what we hear is do what your intuition told you. So I'm not using it that way. I'm saying literally hear it. Be honest about what you hear, whether that's a feeling. I'm using hear like just as a receptive quality, but hear the words that come in, feel the physical sensations, pay attention to the emotional responses, hear them. And then notice what would be the smallest possible way that you could honor what you're hearing. And that if you're somewhere, right, and there's something comes up like, you shouldn't be here. Now you could grab all your stuff and you could walk out the door and you could drive away and, these kinds of things, or you could excuse yourself from the conversation you're in and go to the bathroom just to get, that would be and then maybe the next step reveals itself. But the first piece is what's the smallest possible way that I can honor what my body, my intuition through my body is telling me. That is how to cultivate it. And that is how it actually becomes a superpower. So I tell these stories, and sometimes I have to walk myself all the way back because, frankly, I really have intuition as a superpower. I have a massive amount of self-trust. And honestly, probably some of that I was born with and was given literally by grace and by the grace of the circumstances in which I was raised. And I have been given so many gifts in my life. And some of it has been deeply, deeply cultivated by me. And this, I want to offer you the cultivation because it is what creates it as a superpower. And I mean, like, yeah, if I'm going to brag, like I have intuition as a superpower. It leads me to things that change my life, that take me from being, $12,000 in debt to $100,000 year of building my own business while still being a solo parent and, having these limited hours to work. Like, it has to do with actually how I have listened to what I need to do, even when it hasn't made sense. I shared a story. I'm going to share this story last, and then I kind of want to just check in here. So if you have a comment or a question you want to ask, like, put it in there now so I can get to it. But I told this story, I wrote it, but just to share it here was that I was given this opportunity as part of the mastermind that I'm part of to have like a professional recording, video recording, audio recording. They had an actual team come in, and that I would have time to, like, any message I wanted to make a video of, and I could have it done. And I had people to support me, and I, like all these, it was an incredible opportunity, right? It could be an invitation to my ideal client. It could be like my essential message so that I could actually have a professional video on my website. It could be anything I wanted it to be, but to use this. And I did fuck all about it. And because I just kept going like, I don't know. And this is, I mean, in some ways it's the shadow side of intuition, but I would call it, I actually believe that this is part of intuition, is not pretending to know when you don't. And so rather than forcing myself to, like, choose a topic, do the video, like this kind of thing, I was like, I don't know. And that means I should not take action on this yet. I don't know until the night before the video was going to be recorded in London at this event that I was at. And as I'm going to sleep, I think I took myself to a yoga class. Again, I was like, fuck it. I have to go to a yoga class. I don't want to, but I know I have to go. And in the class, and then going home after that, I was like, oh, what if I did my video? What if it was improv movement? Like, I teach this. Why would I not do, like, I don't teach people talking. I literally teach them, like, embodied expression. What if I did that? And it was like, oh, that's all I knew, right? A little ding, yes, something. I don't know, what does that even mean? It was like horrifying and terrifying. What does it mean? But, like, okay, that was a yes. So I know something. And then I was like, okay, so to music. But again, here I am in London, it's late at night. I'm thinking, am I allowed to use music? Do I have to get copyright? Like, what music is it? How do I don't know. And just to not make a decision and not knowing. And then there was another woman who was in the group with me. Her name is Monique DeBose. And one of her geniuses is as a improv jazz musician, like a vocalist. And I was like, I could ask Monique. Again, I don't know if she's going to say yes. I don't even know what that means. Like, what is this thing even that's being created moment to moment in my mind about this thing? But I just went to her and I said, would you do this thing with me? And she was like, yes. I don't know what this thing is, but yes. And then it was like all the pieces just came together so much more beautifully than I could have planned. And that's what it starts to look like when it's a superpower. But so many of us want to jump from no capacity to superpower capacity. And it takes continuous, I don't want to say continuous because that's like all the time, but I mean regular. It takes regular practice in a consistent, that's what I want, a consistent way that builds that says, you say to this part of yourself, even you might even just check, like, you could even ask yourself, where does my intuition live? And then trust the answer, right? These are all ways to build that capacity, to cultivate it. And then tell that part of yourself, like, I want to hear you more. And it's probably going to say, fuck off. I talk to you all the time and you never listen. So you're going to be like, I totally get it. I'm so sorry. You're right. You're probably talking to me all the time and I haven't listened. So I'm doing my best right now to start listening. And I'm really sorry for the times I don't. And then every time she talks to you, actually hear it and say like, oh, I heard you. Even you could even say to you, because what we usually do is we go like, no, that's not right. We argue with our intuition. So you could literally say like, oh, I hear you. I'm too scared to do that. But actually your intuition will go like, well, at least she heard me and she just admitted she's afraid. Okay, I think I can work with that. And she'll keep talking. So I know this just kind of scratched the surface, and maybe I'm not wrapping it up in the neatest little bow, but I got to jump off here in a minute to go pick up my daughter. So I want to check in and make sure I didn't miss anything really important, like all of you. I love seeing all your names here. So Lisa said, you're just considering going to a weekend intensive. Yeah, so I would just pay attention, Lisa. Again, like, this isn't me saying like, if you had, like, throw your money away. Absolutely. But when something pops up and it's like, I need to be here, go like, okay, yes, I am meant to be there. And I know I'll make the money, or I'm willing to do what it's going to take for me to have the money to pay for that, or to pay the consequences for spending the money because I know. So yes, but that's the anyway, we get confused, like this doesn't make sense. And so again, I would actually give you that practice that I did at the end. Even if you choose not to go to the intensive, go like, I heard you, little intuition down there saying your thing. I'm too afraid to follow you right now, but I did hear you. And that actually begins the relationship, rather than basically arguing and saying, well, you're wrong for telling me I should be there because I don't have the money, so this doesn't make sense. And I hope you can feel the difference between those two. It doesn't. One of the things I like to say about intuition is just because you listen doesn't mean you have to follow it. But the listening, the hearing, and the acknowledging is really, really important. I love that, Naomi. I love whenever you comment, because you bring in such a length of kind of history behind a lot of these things that I don't always know. I don't know, it's like, I think sometimes that I pick up on, but I don't necessarily know. So she said, Werner said that because is a lie. And Werner had a real blunt way about him. It was a very masculine perspective, but I think there's some real truth to that. Daniel, yeah, some of the most painful experiences, and I'd recommend it to anyone. Totally true. His name's Christopher Maher, and he's on Facebook as White Horse McCoy, and there were body sessions, and they were incredible. Yeah, so Lisa said, fear makes me indecisive. Absolutely. So again, right, like, I'm afraid. And it's just something to practice with. Like, so I get afraid and then I can't make a decision. And that's the other reason why I really encourage, first of all, taking note of the intuition without any obligation to follow it. And then second of all, looking at what is the smallest way I could honor this intuition. And I say honor for a reason, because it really might be saying like, you know what, I bet you're right and I'm too afraid. And that's literally an honoring. But then the other honoring of being like, well, I'm going to sign up for that person's blog, and any practice that they give, I'm going to do it. I can't go to their weekend workshop, but I'm going to do it. Like, there's an honoring, like, I hear you. Okay, here's how I'm going to. So like, what's the smallest way? This will cultivate and grow, like literally the body of your intuition. It will also cultivate the relationship between you and your intuition. And it will strengthen that part of you that can just say, yes. Brenna, I love that you caught that. Like, fuck off, I talk to you all the time and you never listen. Absolutely. Um, Beautiful. Well, I loved having all of you here. I would totally stay and just like, I could just talk, 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 talk. I'm gonna go show up for my little girl. And I feel so grateful to get to have these conversations with you, even though I'm the only one that gets to talk. But I love when you bring your questions and comments. And as I said at the beginning, whenever I do one of these, if you find it valuable, something and that you could do that would be really helpful for me is share it. Because I would love to get to talk to people that I don't know yet or who don't know who I am yet. And that would be an enormous gift to me. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And ciao for today.